She stepped through the front door, exhausted but satisfied after another stolen evening with him. The lies had come easily by now, an extra shift at work, a last-minute dinner with friends, an unavoidable errand. Her husband never questioned it. He never suspected a thing. At least, that's what she thought. But something was wrong. The house was too quiet. The air felt thick, heavy, like a storm was about to hit. And then she saw him. He was sitting at the dining table, his hands resting on something in front of him. His face was unreadable, his expression eerily calm. Too calm. Her heart skipped a beat. Then he lifted his hand, revealing her phone. Unlocked. Screen glowing, her blood ran cold. She instinctively reached for it, but he pulled it back, his eyes locking onto hers. Don't. Her fingers curled into her palms. She forced a small laugh, pretending she didn't feel the ground collapsing beneath her. Why do you have my phone? His jaw tightened. I was looking for something earlier. It was unlocked. A message popped up. A wave of nausea rolled over her. This couldn't be happening. He tilted the screen toward her, and there it was. The messages, the calls, the pictures, proof. Her breath hitched. Her legs felt weak beneath her. He knew every word, every secret, every lie. He knew it all. She opened her mouth, scrambling for an excuse, but what could she possibly say? The silence stretched between them like a noose tightening around her throat. Finally he exhaled, shaking his head. How long? She couldn't answer. She didn't know how. He let out a quiet, humorless laugh, his fingers tightening around the phone. You know what? It doesn't even matter. A lump formed in her throat. He stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back. The sound of wood scraping against the floor made her flinch. He still wasn't yelling. He wasn't breaking things. He was just done. And that scared her more than anything. She had spent months telling herself she had control, that as long as she was careful, she could have both. But in this moment, staring into her husband's empty eyes, she realized the truth. She had already lost him. She hadn't planned for it to happen. It wasn't something she had ever imagined herself doing. But somewhere along the way, something changed. At first, her marriage had been everything she wanted. They had late-night talks that lasted for hours, held hands in the car, sent silly texts during the day just to make each other smile. She had been happy. But happiness doesn't always last. Slowly things began to shift. Her husband became busier, more distracted. Work took up more of his time, and when he was home, he was exhausted. She understood. He was working hard to build their future. But as time passed, their conversations became shorter, their laughter less frequent. He still loved her. She knew that. But she couldn't help feeling like something was missing. And then he entered her life. It started with a simple hello, a casual conversation. He was someone from work, a familiar face at the office. At first he was just a friend, but he noticed things. The way she sighed when she thought no one was listening. The way she played with the edge of her sleeve when she was lost in thought. The way she hesitated before answering when someone asked her how she was doing. You seem different lately, he had said one day. Are you okay? She had laughed it off, told him she was fine. But the truth was, she hadn't been asked that in a long time. The more they talked, the more she found herself drawn to him. He made her feel alive again. At first it was just texts, harmless, friendly. A message here and there, a joke, a compliment, nothing inappropriate. Then the messages got longer, more personal, more intimate. She told herself it was nothing, that it wasn't wrong. But then came the first time he touched her, just a light touch on her arm, but it lingered. and she didn't pull away. That's when she knew she was crossing a line. The first time they met outside of work, she told herself it was just two friends having coffee. But the way he looked at her, the way his fingers brushed against hers when he handed her a napkin, it felt like more. And then, one night, it happened. She had told herself she wouldn't let it get that far, but in the moment, when he leaned in, when his lips were on hers, she didn't stop him. It was thrilling, addictive, dangerous, and before she even realized it, she had started leading two lives. One as the devoted wife, one as the woman who was keeping a secret that she was convinced no one would ever find out. She had mastered the art of lying. It hadn't started that way, but over time it became second nature. At first it was small things, a harmless excuse here, a vague explanation there. "Working late tonight," she would text, even though she wasn't. "Grabbing dinner with a friend," she'd say, as she slipped into the arms of another man. Her husband never questioned it. That's what made it so easy. She had a system, and it worked. She deleted messages as soon as they were read, cleared her call logs, made sure there were no suspicious transactions on their shared accounts. Everything was calculated. Even when she came home late, she always made sure she had a reason, a fabricated story, an excuse ready before he even asked. But the thrill of secrecy made her careless. At first, she would text him only when she was alone. Then it became easier to do it in front of her husband, hidden beneath the table or disguised as checking emails. A simple "I miss you," a teasing "When can I see you again?" She would smirk as she pressed send, knowing her husband was sitting just inches away. He had no idea, or so she thought. She had built two lives, one with her husband and one in secret. The affair made her feel alive, like she was more than just a wife stuck in the dull routine of marriage. A stolen kiss before heading home, whispered conversations late at night, a heartbeat racing every time her phone buzzed. She was convinced she was getting away with it. But then the little things started adding up. Her husband began noticing the changes, the extra effort she put into her appearance before she went out with friends, the way she suddenly became protective over her phone, keeping it face down on the table, the way she would smile at a text, then quickly hide the screen. He never said anything, but she could feel it, the way he was watching her more closely. Then one day, everything fell apart. She had been in a rush, distracted by an incoming message, and forgot to delete it. A simple mistake, one she never should have made. That night, when she walked through the door, her husband was sitting at the table. Her phone was in his hands, unlocked. Her stomach twisted as he lifted his eyes to hers, and in that moment, she knew. She wasn't careful enough. She wasn't as smart as she thought she was. She wasn't getting away with anything. She watched in stunned silence as he moved through the room, methodically pulling clothes from the dresser and placing them into his suitcase. No yelling, no questions. Just finality. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking, "we can talk about this." He didn't answer. She took a step closer, desperate to break through the unbearable silence. "I messed up. I know I did, but stop." His voice was quiet but firm, not shaking with rage, not trembling with heartbreak, just empty. That hurt more than if he had screamed at her. Her hands curled into fists at her sides as she struggled to breathe. "I never wanted to hurt you." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head as he zipped up his bag. "You never wanted to hurt me?" He turned, finally meeting her eyes. "Then what did you think was going to happen?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out, because she had never thought this far ahead. She had convinced herself that she could keep everything separate, that she could have both worlds, the thrill of something new and the stability of the man who had always been there. But now, standing in front of him, watching him pack his life into a suitcase, she realized the truth. She had already lost him. "You didn't just cheat on me," he said, his voice steady, his eyes unreadable. "You made me feel like a fool." The weight of those words crushed her. Tears blurred her vision as she shook her head. "Save it," he interrupted, picking up his bag. "I don't need excuses. I don't need apologies." He paused for a moment, taking a slow breath. "I just need to leave." Panic clawed at her chest. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. For the first time, he refused to touch her. "Please," she tried again, her voice cracking, "just don't go like this." He studied her for a moment, as if memorizing her face. Then he turned and walked to the door. She wanted to chase after him, to throw herself at his feet and beg, but she couldn't move. She had spent months telling herself she was in control, but in the end, she had no control at all. The door opened. He stepped out, and then he was gone. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through her call log. Every call went unanswered. Every text sat on delivered, but never read. Her husband had cut her off completely. She tried again, pressing his name on the screen, her breath shallow as she waited for him to pick up. The ringing stopped after just one tone. Blocked. A choked sob escaped her lips as she dropped the phone onto her lap. She never thought it would end like this. She had assumed there would be a conversation, maybe an argument, a chance. But he hadn't given her one. He had walked out the door and erased her from his life in an instant. She tried his best friend next, desperation rising in her chest. The call didn't even go through, blocked. Her hands shook as she sent a message to his sister. She sat on the floor, her back against the cold wall, staring blankly at the phone in her trembling hands. The room around her was dark, quiet, lifeless, just like her world now. Her husband was gone. She had spent the last few days reaching out to him, calling him over and over again, sending texts she wasn't even sure he was reading. "Please, just talk to me. I know I hurt you, but I need to explain. I don't expect you to forgive me, but please don't shut me out." Nothing, no response, only silence. She dialed his number again, clinging to the faintest hope that maybe this time he would answer. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. Her fingers tightened around the phone as she ended the call. She tried his best friend next. Voicemail, his sister, blocked, his mother. No response. One by one, they had all shut her out. She wasn't just the wife who had cheated, she was the woman who had betrayed someone they loved, and none of them were willing to listen. A sharp pain clenched her chest as she scrolled through their old messages. "Can you pick up milk on your way home? I miss you. I love you." She pressed a hand to her mouth, swallowing back the sob threatening to break free. How had it come to this? She had thought she was unhappy before. She had convinced herself that she needed excitement, passion, something more than the routine of marriage. But now, sitting in the wreckage of the life she had destroyed, she finally understood. She wasn't unhappy. She was ungrateful. Her husband had loved her. He had trusted her. He had given her a home, stability, a life most people longed for, and she threw it all away for something fleeting. Her hands shook as she pulled up another number, the man she had risked everything for, the man she had destroyed her marriage for. She hesitated before pressing call. One ring, two. Straight to voicemail. Her heart pounded as she tried again. This time the call didn't even go through. She stared at the screen, numb. He had blocked her, A bitter, painful laugh escaped her lips. It was almost funny. She had ruined everything for him. She had risked everything for him. And now he was gone too. She tried texting him anyway. "Please, just talk to me." No delivery notification. She tried again. "I need you." Still nothing. Her hands went cold as she realized the truth. He had never loved her. She had been an escape to him, a distraction, something thrilling and new. And now that the thrill was over, he had disappeared. She had convinced herself that he was different, that what they had was real, that he would be there for her. But the moment things got complicated, the moment her life fell apart, he had left her to deal with the consequences alone. A choked sob tore from her throat as she dropped her phone onto the floor. She had nothing left. No husband, no lover, no friends, just regret, and no way to undo what she had done. She wiped her face with shaking hands and forced herself to stand, walking slowly to the bathroom. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her in the mirror, red, swollen eyes, dark circles, a hollow, broken expression. She looked like a stranger, the confident, carefree woman who had once believed she could have it all was gone. She had destroyed herself. She gripped the edges of the sink, struggling to breathe. What was she supposed to do now? She had spent so much time chasing something new, something exciting, without realizing that the best thing she ever had was right in front of her. And now she could never get it back. She thought back to the last time she had seen her husband, the way he had looked at her, not with anger, not with hate, but with disappointment. That had hurt the most. She would have preferred him screaming at her, breaking things, telling her how much he despised her. But instead, he had just packed his bags, walked past her without a second glance, and left. He hadn't even fought for her, because she wasn't worth fighting for anymore. Her breath hitched as she turned away from the mirror, stumbling back into the bedroom. She grabbed her phone again, opening social media for the first time in days. Her hands trembled as she searched for his name. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw a new post. A photo of him, sitting at a restaurant, laughing. His best friend beside him, his sister across the table. He looked happy. Her stomach twisted as she scrolled through the comments. "Good to see you smiling again, bro. You deserve this happiness. Best decision you ever made." Tears burned in her eyes. They weren't just supporting him. They were celebrating that he had left her. She scrolled further and noticed something even worse, a woman sitting next to him. She wasn't touching him. They weren't posing together. But the way she was leaning toward him, the way he was smiling at her, it was enough. A sharp pain shot through her chest. Was he moving on already? The thought of him with someone else made her feel physically sick, not because she had a right to be jealous. She didn't. But because it meant she really had no way back. She had spent weeks convincing herself that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. But this was the end. Her fingers hovered over the message icon, her mind screaming at her to type something, anything. "I miss you." Delete. "I'm sorry." Delete. She could send 100 messages. She could call 1,000 times. It wouldn't matter. He was done. He was healing. And she? She was stuck in the ruins of the life she destroyed. She set the phone down, closing her eyes as the weight of regret suffocated her. She had always thought she wanted more. Now she just wanted one more chance. But it was too late. She sat on the floor of her dimly lit apartment. The only sound in the room was the ticking clock on the wall. Each second that passed felt like a reminder of how much time had slipped through her fingers. Time she could never get back. Her phone rested on the coffee table, its screen dark. No missed calls. No new messages. Just silence. It had been weeks since her husband walked out the door without looking back. She had spent the first few days in denial, convincing herself that he just needed space, that he would eventually answer her calls, that he would at least listen. But now she knew the truth. He wasn't coming back. Her chest ached as she stared at the blank screen, scrolling through old messages, rereading the conversations they once had. "Can you pick up dinner on your way home? Miss you, love you. You make me the happiest man in the world." She squeezed her eyes shut. How had she let it get to this point? She had a good man, a man who loved her, who gave her everything, and she had thrown it all away for a fleeting thrill, a thrill that meant nothing now. Her fingers hovered over his contact. She knew it was useless, but she dialed anyway. 1 ring, 2, straight to voicemail. She hung up before the automated message could play, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Blocked. She had tried calling his best friend, his sister, his family. One by one, they all shut her out. She wasn't just his wife anymore. She was the woman who had betrayed him, and no one wanted anything to do with her. She opened social media for the first time in days, dreading what she might see. Her stomach clenched when she found his profile. There was a new post, a picture of him sitting at a cafe, laughing, his best friend beside him, his sister across the table. She froze, staring at the screen. He looked happy. A deep, twisting pain spread through her chest. For weeks she had imagined him grieving, heartbroken, struggling to move on without her. But that wasn't what she saw. She saw a man who had let go, a man who was moving forward. The comments only made it worse. "You deserve this happiness, bro. Glad to see you smiling again. Best decision you ever made." She scrolled, her vision blurring with tears. They weren't comforting him. They were celebrating his freedom from her. She gripped her phone, her chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. Maybe if she sent one last message, maybe if she could just talk to him. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I miss you." Delete. "I'm sorry." Delete. Nothing she said would change what she had done. Nothing would erase the pain she had caused. She had spent so much time chasing something new, something exciting, something that made her feel alive. But now she felt nothing at all. Her hand shook as she scrolled through her call log, stopping at one name, the man she had risked everything for. She dialed. 1 ring, 2, straight to voicemail. Her breath caught in her throat as she tried again. This time the call didn't even go through. Blocked. Her hands went numb as she stared at the screen. The man who had once told her everything she wanted to hear, who had made her feel wanted and desired, who had whispered that she was special, had left without a second thought. She had destroyed her marriage for him, and he hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. She grabbed the edge of the coffee table, her breath uneven, her mind spinning. She had nothing left, no husband, no family, no lover, nothing, just the unbearable weight of what she had done. She had spent months thinking she could have both worlds, thinking she was in control, thinking she was too smart to get caught, but she had never been in control. And now she was just another mistake someone walked away from. Tears burned down her cheeks as she curled into herself, the cold realization settling deep into her bones. She thought she had been unhappy before, but now she knew what true loneliness felt like. And the worst part, no one felt sorry for her, not even herself.